afternoon, everybody. We'll go ahead and get started here. My name is Ben Jewell, University of Nebraska Extension educator based in Otoe County, Nebraska. And this is our monthly Nebraska Regional Food System Initiative network meeting. So today is March 18th. So we're going to just a couple quick updates for you here up top that I'll give in just a second. And then I'll turn it over to our guest speaker today, Ben Dutton, who's also with Nebraska Extension. Carol, would you mind I think you should be able to let folks in from the waiting room. Looks like there's somebody trying to join there. All right, so let's get right into it here. So quick announcement here. We've got this has just come out in the last week or so. If you are a producer or a small farm or food-based business owner and you are working with schools, there's some funds available from the Rural Health Transformation Program coming out of Nebraska Department of Health and Human Services. Applications due pretty quickly here on April 8th. They're up to $80,000. You can see kind of the who's eligible to apply: producers, food cooperatives, food pantries, and nonprofit entities. And this is kind of intended to, with the outcomes of building or strengthening sustainable partnerships between the applicants and schools and improving healthy food access for students and their families. So it's a pretty good opportunity if you know farmers or producers, ranchers, anybody kind of really producing food that could sell to schools or and they are looking for folks who already have relationships with schools, have started selling to schools, or could really demonstrate that they're able to do that pretty quickly. So um, we are hosting ourselves, Nebraska Extension and Center for Rural Affairs are hosting a couple of webinars next week on this RFA that just came out. One at 12 o'clock on the 25th and one at 7 o'clock there. Those QR codes are for registration links. If you're interested or if you know folks who might be interested in this funding and they want to learn a little bit more about it, have them register, and hopefully we'll be able to get some answers to questions. I will say up front that this is not our funding program, so we only know what we know, and we'll do our best to give you the best information we can give you and try to track down answers where necessary. This funding has come about pretty quickly, and it's a quick turnaround, and there hasn't been a lot of time to really prepare people to apply. So stepping in there to do what we can. So just a reminder, our next couple months of this speaker series, April 15th, same time, 2 to 3 p.m. Dana Freeman from Nebraska Extension's Urban Agriculture Specialist. We'll be talking about the recent work on assessing the food system in Omaha. Some work she's been involved in up there. And then in May on the 20th, we will hear from Heritage Omaha, who's in the process of establishing a year-round public market. So I look forward to that. And that's it. I'm going to turn it over to Ben and let him take it from here.
Awesome. Thanks, Ben. Yeah, I'm with Nebraska Extension, and I'm also working with the Department of Agriculture on a supply chain work. And so, as part of that work, here, I'll go ahead and let's see, share my screen here. Um, see if that's the right one. Some of you may have been on Rural Rendezvous. This is going to be the same, kind of the same conversation. And so you may have thought of some things you want to ask, or you may be bored out of your mind. But this is going to be the same presentation. So as part of this supply chain work that I've been doing with the Department of Agriculture, we decided that we wanted to do a survey in order to improve supply chain. We wanted to find out what institutions are already buying local foods and what ones potentially would buy if some things were overcome. And so I'm just going to kind of walk through the results. We had a little bit over 200 people or institutions fill this out. And I should say right away, we don't know necessarily what the people that filled out this survey from each institution, we don't know what their role is. So some of the things as we walk through it, you'll see some say, well, we don't know, where the food comes from or whatever, because they may not be They may not be the head buyer. They might not be, we don't know who they are. So there are some, let's leave some grace in there for those types of things. But these are the institutions that we targeted in this survey was K-12 schools, restaurants, grocery, retail, and healthcare. And I'll say primarily rural. We didn't do a lot of, we did get some data from the metro, but they're all going to be schools because they were the easiest to get to. So those were the institutions, the entities that we were going for. And of those that completed the survey, 64% said that they currently purchase local food products. And the other thing I should say is we did not define local food project products for anyone. We let them self-define that. Generally, we consider it to be, oh, I think it's 600 miles or inside state boundaries is kind of generally what we've thought of, but we didn't define that for people. And so 64% said that they already do, 23 said they don't. Here's the 13 that said they're not sure. Um, what types of products do you currently purchase locally? You can see here, and these are actual numbers down here at the bottom. So almost 60 institutions purchase fresh vegetables and fruits. A little over 40 meat and poultry, fresh meat and poultry. 35 frozen meat and poultry, dairy and cheese. You can see eggs kind of drops off to about 20 institutions. And then these value added things are quite low. And I want to just draw your attention maybe to these numbers here, just kind of to get, just so that you have an idea, because when we get later into the presentation, I want to show you the difference between what people say they would buy and what they currently buy. And the whole idea of collecting this data was a couple of things. One is we wanted to be able to share out to a producer. We wanted to say, these are people literally that said they would buy, here's their contact information. And so when people filled out the survey, we asked them to give us their name, phone number, what institution they were from. So that is, number one is we wanted to share that information. Two is that we wanted to give confidence to producers that they could say, I see that there are currently buyers. Now, I think sometimes it's hard to take the next step into a higher production level or to invest in a greenhouse or to, do those things that might put you in a place where you could sell year round because you're like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to sell this stuff. Is it really worth my investment? And part of our object was to be able to say, yes, there is a demand. So consider making that investment. So anyway, those two things, we wanted to share the people and then try to give confidence. So what are your primary sources for local food purchases? You can see right here, of those that purchase local foods, 70 of them buy direct from farmer, producer. Some of them buy from distributors. And I would say, just looking at the data and what some of the comments were, I would say that they're talking about basically Cashway US Foods because they do carry some local food, not very much, honestly, but they do carry some. And so, just from the comments, those are kind of the big ones as far as distributors. And then you can see the others, farmers markets, local grocery stores. What are the requirements? What do you require suppliers? So here's an institution. What does a supplier have to show me in order for me to purchase? State certifications. And when we delved into the comments on this, they're talking about like an egg number, or they're talking about some of them, frankly, didn't really know what certifications, for fresh vegetables and fruits, there's really no certification required. You can do gap training, and that would be awesome, but it's not required. But so even some buyers are confused about can I even buy? Can I even buy these things? What does it take? That kind of thing. The other thing about the state certifications was for value-added products was that they had to be processed in a registered, a licensed facility. USDA inspected, that's obviously for meat. That was a very common one. Um, Quality and there was a lot of quality and reputation related things. For instance, other might have been a couple of them said, I want to be able to go to the farm and see the facility. I want to know who the farmer is. So that was an other category. Liability insurance, this one actually surprised us quite a bit that more did not have this. You'd almost think that all of them would have. But again, this might go to who filled out the survey as well. And then quality and reputation. So these were the requirements for institutional buyers for suppliers. All right, so here's the one that I think is really telling. And I'm just going to go ahead and skip to the next one, which is the comparison. So this is the last one that I just skipped is what would you buy? If you know if you had if there were no barriers, nothing like that, what would you buy? And you can see here again, look at the numbers down here at the bottom. So almost 60 institutions currently buy vegetables and fruits locally. Almost 100 would buy that if and we're going to look at the barriers next. But almost 100 would do it if the barriers were not, if there were no barriers. Fresh meat and poultry, frozen meat and poultry, again, you can see the absolute numbers. You got, 40 by, a little over 40 by fresh meat, 60 would. And that's the same as you look at those numbers, it's the same all the way down the line. Look at the value added products, baked goods and flour and stuff. I mean, this is, 5 institutions said that they did, and over 20 said that they would. So this is the slide that we really want to be, pointing out to producers to say there are, you can produce more because there's a demand. There is a demand for local products. Eggs would more than double from who buys it now to who would buy them. Dairy is more. So anyway, I think this is an important slide to just really get people thinking about there's already a demand and there would be greater demand if the supply was there. So the next slide goes into what are the barriers. So we wanted to find out, from an institution standpoint, like what are the things keeping you from buying more? We already know you do. So what are the things that keep you from buying more? And if we were together, I would, ask you to take a look at this. We'd have a conversation about what your observations are and, be a little bit more interactive. But I think I'll just, for today's sake, I'll just point out some of the things that I guess surprised us. When I say us, I mean the Department of Ag, staff of the Department of Ag, Holly, Riley, Eastland. Um, so here's a couple things I want to point out. One is that price is not the number one barrier. So notice not a barrier and minor barrier. These are the red and the orange. So notice that they're not the highest. So that's a lot of times we think, well, I can't sell local products because it costs too much. People don't want to spend that much. Now, let's be honest. Yes, there is economics obviously out there, but it's not the number one thing. However, the number one things you can see pretty clearly is that availability and delivery distribution are the top barriers of purchasing. The other thing, the other one I want to point out too is consistency, which I think really relates quite a bit to availability, particularly when you're talking to institutions. They need to know that they can get a set supply year round, that it's really going to be there. So I thought that these were really interesting, availability and delivery. Relationships. Notice the difference between yellow and green and red and orange. So relationships were not a barrier. People felt like they could they could develop relationships with producers. They felt like that was all right, but getting it to them was harder. The distribution and deliver or availability and delivery. Maybe I will stop just for a second and say, does anybody have any thoughts or comments about that from your experience? Does this make sense to you?
Yeah, feel free to come off mute if you like, or put a comment or a question in the chat here. I would say, Ben, that this aligns with what I think what we've seen before. That
Yeah.
yeah, it is that sort of middle of the supply chain issue of getting the product to the schools. And I think there's also just like a related issue of maybe it's transparency or just better kind of understanding on both sides of, how do schools make purchases? What are the kinds of quantities that they're looking for? What are their limitations in terms of being able to handle fresh produce and fresh food products and things like that. So I think there's kind of like I feel like yeah, I think this is great, and this really does show us that I think some of the understanding of the challenges of farm to school of the past around price, being this major barrier, it's not really anymore. And this really does point to that and say there's other issues that we should be focusing on and working on. And I think that's super helpful.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Anybody else have any thoughts on that? So that's, these were kind of the barriers. And so what we're going to be doing is, so this is, are you interested in being connected to a producer? 81% said yes. So what our next steps are is in September and October, we are going to be having, we have kind of a dozen locations already kind of identified. We're going to start kind of west to east, and we're going to do 90-minute workshops. And these workshops are um, basically matchmaking workshops. We're going to really try to connect with as many institutional buyers within kind of a 30 or 50-mile radius. We don't want to go too far because, as you could see, the distribution was a real issue. And for a producer, um, going further than 30 or 50 miles just does not make economic sense, unless they can aggregate, unless you can have a group of farmers come together, which is something we just have not been able to tackle. We have not done a good job, or don't know how, or to really do a good hub or aggregation type of a system. So at this point, it's kind of the producers going themselves. So these workshops are going to be really intended to be 30 to 50-mile radius. We're going to start at Scotts Bluff and work our way east. And we're going to basically have, people introduce themselves. We're going to kind of show some of this data. It's going to be very interactive. And at the end, there's going to be an opportunity for people to meet each other and hopefully just say, yeah, this is a supplier that I can use, or this is a place I can go to. We're also making the data available to anyone who asks. So we've had some people say, hey, I live in whatever is, who's close to me that says that they would buy flour, or who would whatever. And we just give out that information. Um so that's our next steps. In November, the earliest in November, we're going to the Department of Ag is going to have a kind of a wrap up of uh, this grant that they've been working in, the RFSI grant. And we'll be inviting producers and buyers and things to that as well. So that's November. So that's the end game of what this survey was all about. One of the one of the thing we asked for, people to kind of openly share some things, and this is a quote that I think wraps up a lot of what we saw in the survey is that this institution, this was a restaurant that said customers love that we're trying to source the freshest and best ingredients. So there again, there is demand, and I think people do appreciate local foods, especially if it's high quality. And so this is, we're not fighting a losing battle. There is demand here. Sometimes we feel like we haven't moved the needle very far, but there certainly is demand. So these are the kind of the six takeaways that we found. There's strong interest and positive experiences with local food, and a lot of respondents already purchase it with high satisfaction. Two is that supply limitations, that is quantity, seasonality, availability, is really one of the primary constraints, is that an institution has a hard time committing to buy locally if they don't know um, that they have consistent, reliable supply. Um, Cost and margin pressure are real, so we don't want to be fake about that. Of course, the cost matters, but not as much as what people have always thought. Distribution, delivery, and logistics are important. Reliable delivery and aggregation are critical. So how can we tackle this distribution model? Regulatory confusion and compliance challenges persist. So I probably get, and I bet Ben gets, I don't know, how many do you get? Probably three or four a week of people asking, what are the rules for this? And I probably get one a week. What are the rules for me to be able to do this? And so that is something we really need to help clear up is what are the requirements? And it's on both sides. It's on buyers and producers. And then finally, high need for connections, information, and technical assistance. Those were kind of the six things that came out of the survey.